Ah, vampires. Who doesn't love these guys? In this episode, we're going to take a look at the first North American Game Boy title released outside of the July 31st, 1989 launch window. There were 5 games that helped launch the system, but early adopters of the Game Boy had to wait nearly 5 months for the first new game to come out. Publisher Konami, having successfully launched 2 games in a brand new franchise called Castlevania, decided to bring the series to Nintendo's flagship portable. And although opinions on this game vary quite extensively, it does have a charm on its own merit. Let's check out the hype factor of Dracula's very first Game Boy appearance. Japanese publisher Konami, no stranger to Nintendo, gets credit for not phoning in this early Game Boy box art. Just look at this masterpiece. The cover is so packed that it doesn't have room for taglines, and instead displays the main slaying protagonist, Christopher Belmont, with his whip out and coming for the spirit of Dracula. The Muscle Man aesthetic is awesome, definitely in vogue in the late 1980s.
You looked at me, man. I could see the demons in your eyes.
Christopher must have forgotten that he has a sword and shield. In the gameplay, it is a whips-only affair. Also, the use of colors is so fantastic, with haunting blue fog at the base of the box, rising into the evil redness of Drac and his castle, to a haunted full moon near the title at the top. Drac's empty glowing eyes, his pig nose, and salivating mouth are powerful elements of hype. As a kid, I remember seeing a similar interpretation of Dracula in a Dungeons & Dragons module called Ravenloft, Realm of Terror. 80s vampires were just so cool.
Vampires!
Flying to the back, it reads, "A challenge you can't walk away from." I think some viewers had no problem walking away from this game, and ironically, it had everything to do with walking. The epic text on the back reads, "After getting his wings clipped in Castlevania and Simon's Quest, the death-defying Count has risen again!" I wasn't aware that the only way to get Dracula down was to clip his wings. Stake through the heart, garlic, sunlight, holy water. Clip his wings? This sounds more like what to do with a chicken to me. And yes, we have 3, count them, 3 screenshots, which are a great representation of what you'll actually see in the game. 3 different levels, with a prime evil boss. Enemy pixels and spiky platforming are represented here. If you're still feeling O negative, this commercial from 1989 might leave you a little more A positive.
Konami's Castlevania The Adventure for Nintendo's Game Boy. With a maze of vampire crypts and unearthly evils, it is about to sink its fangs into you.
This box art, commercial, and the 3 gameplay images definitely up the hype for our adventure. Now it's time to see how the gameplay stacks up in relation to this piece of art from 1989. Starting in the forest outside of Dracula's castle, you are Christopher Belmont. Bitten at the outset by a cursed vampire and staggering in a low-motion stupor towards your only known cure, a faster processor for the then-new Game Boy. Yeah, okay, so I made that last part up. But as soon as you begin the game, you're immediately presented with something that wasn't advertised on the box. Belmont is a super stiff, lumbering, slowpoke of a main character. Unfortunately for you, other creatures move quite quickly, so you're just going to have to accept one of the biggest deal breakers of this game. Now, if you can imagine being a 7-year-old kid with only 1 game to play for half of a year, you might be able to use your imagination to help fill in for this gameplay problem. That is one way that I got through this game while still seeing some amazing positives about it. But this is no joke. Controlling Christopher is an exercise in equal parts patience and frustration. You're whipping, climbing, crouching, and cracking through 4 levels of gameplay, leading up to a final confrontation with Dracula himself. You have a whip that has 3 levels of power and ability. You've got the plain whip, you've got a super whip, and you've got a dull whip. A flaming whip. To collect round crystals, they power up your weapon, which is very important in this game. If you take any damage with a powered up weapon, your whip level goes back to plain old vanilla. Destroy candles to find hearts, crystals, and coins, which are used for extra lives. There are some secret rooms too, and a generous continue policy to help ease the frustrating controls. You'll learn to love them. The unlimited continues.
I am thirsty for blood. And it's happy hour.
Scrolling through the stages, you encounter many enemy types. Death bats, madmen, big eyes, she-worms, evil armors, punaguchis, and plenty of primary evils, aka bosses. Even though there is variety in the levels and in the enemies for a first-generation Game Boy game, it took me quite a few deaths to get comfortable with the limiting speed of Belmont's movements. Jumping over the big eyes, for example, becomes kind of a litmus test for how well a person can control Mr. B. I got it down only a few times, but when you do get the platforming right, it is very satisfying. Graphically, here are the positives. Maybe it's because of the graphics that the gameplay runs so slowly, but this is a beautiful game. Excellent atmospheric touches, from full forest tree canopies to dead and mulchy tree stumps, cavernous stalagmites and underground bridges to mountains lofting far into the distance. This game has amazing backgrounds that immerse the player. Enemy types and details are also quite nice, making this a graphical powerhouse for a first-generation Game Boy game. Just make sure that you're playing it on a backlit screen, or else the backgrounds go from immersive to distracting. Just compare the backgrounds of Super Mario Land to Castlevania The Adventure, and you can see that this is an amazing step up, even though, obviously, some sacrifices were made. Musically, maybe even more so than the graphics, the music is a tour de force of what the Game Boy is capable of. It has a sweeping sense of epicness that is among some of the best chiptunes to be produced for the system. Just listen. First, the beginning of our epic adventure. Level 2 sounds like a lead electric guitar is pushing the game forward. It's awesome. This frustrating level, level 3, has a falling riff in it that you're probably going to be hearing a lot. And finally, we have this epic mega final boss with a throat-gripping confrontation. If the speed of the game gets you down, at least the tunes are there to keep you company. I really appreciate what Konami tried to do with this game, even though their ambition might have paralyzed the final outcome of the game itself. Graphically and musically, this effort proved that the Game Boy was capable of amazing levels of graphical immersion that are in many ways the opposite of Nintendo's flagship Super Mario Land. Mario sacrificed graphics in order to gain that familiar Mario speed, and it mostly worked. Hindsight seems to suggest that Nintendo made the better decision. The graphics and feel of the levels took precedence, and poor Christopher Belmont. I hope he gets rid of that athlete's foot real soon so that he can walk a little bit faster.
Boom! Tough Actin, Tinactin.
I'm thankful in the end that a third-party publisher really tried to give their first shot at this new hardware a decent attempt, especially for a more mature title. Konami would eventually make 2 more Castlevania titles on the original Game Boy, improving upon the original release in almost every way. Seeing such a strong third-party attempt to support the Game Boy was great, and no doubt helped convince other publishers to give this new system a try. Castlevania The Adventure is a 30 to 40 minute slow action platformer to throw in, provided that you can see the backgrounds, play it backlit, you enjoy memorizing levels, you don't mind endlessly continuing, and most importantly, you don't lose track of time.
You lost track of time.
My perspective on Castlevania the Adventure is a little unique, because this was my very first Castlevania game ever, so bear that in mind. From what I understand, I'm excited that it only gets better from here. And that, my friends, is all of the light that I can shine on Castlevania the Adventure for Game Boy. Thanks for whipping it through Castlevania the Adventure for the Nintendo Game Boy. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Boy Meets Game, where we look at classic games from a slightly different perspective. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again real soon.